don't have predetermined list of questions. Very casual conversation, just like we're chatting it up over a cup of coffee, man. So I like to keep it very casual.
Okay, great. I don't have any questions, but I have I listened to a few of your podcasts, and
Okay.
that was helpful to kind of get a sense of like your style. That was
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, man. It's not about me. It's about you. I try not to do a whole lot of talking. I try to let the guests speak and share their information. So yeah, man. So Ames, I appreciate you joining the podcast. I am been on this regenerative agriculture, um, I guess, journey for a while, wanting to learn more about it. And when I saw your the news story about your winery being the first regenerative organic certified winery in your county, is it the United States or county?
In our county,
In the county, okay.
but one of the first in the country. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big step, man, because I'm like, wine is so heavily sprayed with all types of chemicals, conventional wines. Is that the case?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So what was your journey, man? So first introduce yourself and let everyone know your winery.
Yeah, so my name is Ames Morison. I'm the co-founder of Medlock Ames Winery. We are located in Sonoma County in the Alexander Valley and Russian River Valley, growing appellations. And we farm organically and make about 5,000 cases of wine a year. Last year was my 25th harvest, farming or making wine from our vineyard. And um, we've been certified organic for a really long time, uh, and that was always really important to me. But I kind of feel like doing that, I kind of checked the box of being like a responsible person, and kind of didn't really think a lot about climate change or things beyond our own farm. I really wanted to be a good steward. It mostly revolved around not wanting the people who work in our field to be exposed to pesticides. I don't want to be exposed to those when I'm out working. um, that was really the main reason why we were organic.
Hmm.
But about 4 years ago, we had a wildfire sweep through our vineyard that burned about 20% of our vines, a couple miles of fencing, and thousands of trees, like beautiful oak and Douglas fir trees. And it made me start to think more critically about what we're doing, what's happening, beyond the borders of our farm. And there have been a series of wildfires in Northern California, and it just seems like too much. It was just, made me just really ponder like what's going on, and nothing like, having it hit home and almost losing everything you've worked for your whole career, to almost go up and literally go up and smoke. That just really made us dig deep. And so I started doing a lot of research and listening to a lot of podcasts, reading, and I kept hearing this one phrase like recurring, regenerative, and I didn't know what it meant, but the people I heard talking about it were people that I admired or seemed to know a lot about farming, both in the wine world and in farming in general. And a lot of the practices were things that we had tried over the years but abandoned because sometimes if something's hard or it's confusing or it's expensive, even if you think it's the right thing, it's easy to let it go if you don't have a really strong understanding of why and how important it is. And when I started studying regenerative, I realized that there's suddenly like a scientific framework for all these practices, like no-till or increasing biodiversity, using animals in your farming. And so all of a sudden everything kind of like clicked and fell into place. And so then I realized that there was this brand new certification that was out called Regenerative Organic, that it was started by the Rodale Institute, Patagonia, and Dr. Bronner's soap. And they started a pilot program, and they included a few other they included several different farms, and one of them was a winery in the central coast of California called Tablas Creek, and they've always been kind of in the forefront of organic and biodynamic and just a progressive company. So we went down there to visit them and learn from their experience, and that kind of gave us the confidence to move forward with it.
This podcast episode is brought to you by Signature Touch. Signature Touch is veteran owned and operated, and it was started by my wife and myself with a mission to provide the highest quality, all natural skincare products made from ethically sourced ingredients. We have body butters, lip balms, and deodorants, and the best part is you could use it on yourself, and they're safe for everyone in the family, including your children. My wife's favorite body butter is Bernilla. It's made with bergamot and vanilla botanical extract. People say it smells like key lime pie. My favorite is Lavensense. It's made with lavender essential oil and frankincense. It makes your skin feel so nourished, but it's also good on bug bites and rashes. Check us out today. The website is oursignaturetouch.com. Use code JLA to receive 10% off your first purchase. The website, it's oursignaturetouch.com. Is there a big difference between organic farming and regenerative farming and the daily practices that you do?
Well, that's a good question. Trying to think of how to approach it. So we got certified as regenerative organic. So, but regenerative by itself doesn't have to be organic. And there's some farmers that are using herbicides and pesticides in their regenerative program, and I'm not really. That doesn't quite make sense to me, but I don't know enough about that part of it. But for what we're doing, from going from organic to regenerative organic, there are two main differences. One is really focusing on the soil. So we have to still be organic, but then also not tilling or going towards eliminating tillage as much as possible. And that's really hard for us because conventional growers, they have like this, they have herbicides that they can rely on to control weeds. Weeds compete with vines for nutrients and water. That's really important in California. It won't rain for 6 months here. And so whatever rain falls in the winter, that's what has to see the vines through for the whole year. You can also supplementary irrigate, but those weeds are really a big source of competition. We don't really have any other. We don't have that chemical tool to control them. And farmers have been using tillage for as long as agriculture has existed to get rid of that competition. So that was the biggest challenge, was to get rid of tillage. And the reason that's important is because when you till the ground, you're turning under all the weeds, killing them, so A, you're eliminating the competition. B, you're exposing that topsoil to oxygen. That kills all the microbes that are in the top 6 to 8 inches. And once they die, they break down, and the nutrients that make up their body are soluble and can go and feed your plant. So that's like a great thing. And then you're also, as you're incorporating oxygen into the soil, you're fluffing it up a little bit. It makes it easier for the vine's roots to spread into that kind of soft environment rather than hard soil. But once, after about a month, all that soil life has died, and your soil doesn't have anything living in it until it starts raining again many months later. And so and then also once it's fluffed up, if you have to drive over it, which we do for our vineyard operations, that fluffed up soil, when it's driven on, packs down tighter than it was before. So that it makes it harder for water to get down into the soil, and it makes it harder for roots to grow once it's compacted. So that's really important. And then the other big difference between organic and regenerative organic is this focus on worker fairness. And one of the requirements to be regenerative organic is, just addressing that topic is important. Organic just assumes that you're following the law, and but it doesn't. There's not any focus, or it doesn't address worker fairness at all.
Hmm.
So part of the process is creating policies and training program for our employees so that they know what their rights are. Having policies for things that just never even entered my mind is like, how can we ensure that people who work for us are not victims of human trafficking? That never even occurred to me. It's I don't think it's the case in our region, but for many parts of the world, that is an issue for farm workers. But we include our farm workers much more in our decision making. That's really important. In the wine world, we always say great wine is made in the vineyard, and if that's true, that means we really need to value and respect the people that are doing that work, because they are the ones that have that really intimate on-site knowledge of every vine and how they react to different conditions. That has a big impact on the wine. And then the other big part of worker fairness is paying a living wage. And when I first heard that, that just sounds like the lowest bar possible. Like, how could you not pay a living wage? But I mean, that just seems like inhuman. But it's hard to do that and make money as a business. It's the cost of living in Sonoma County, where we are, is really high, and there's the MIT created this calculator that determines the cost of living in every county in California and every state in the country, and it takes into account everything to do with the cost of living to determine what a living wage is. And so we have to pay that wage plus 10% to all of our field workers. And so that's a really big that's a commitment that we have to that process.
Was that a big organizational change from where you were with organic?
It wasn't that big. Most of our vineyard team is they're permanent employees. They have benefits. They get vacation and holidays off. And then during harvest time, we need to hire extra people to help. But the rate we pay during harvest time is much higher than people would make in their it's much higher hourly rate than they make the rest of the year. So that's not a problem. But it's the people that come and help us for just like a month during May and June. We had not been paying that living wage before. So it was just the commitment to make sure that we were making those people whole.
That's pretty awesome that the ROC addresses worker fairness. I was not aware that they addressed that aspect of just agricultural work as a whole.
Yeah. That meant a lot to me.
Yeah. So what made you want to, I guess going back a little bit, what made you want to become organic in the first place?
I grew up on a farm, and my father, we had this one experience where we rented out part of our farm to another farmer for at least some amount of time, I don't know, maybe 10 years. And that farmer didn't really take good care of the land. And after 10 years, the fields were just covered with thistles. And when the lease expired and we took it back, my father researched what to do about all these thistles. And one of the recommendations was this herbicide. It's just one and done, and then you don't have to ever worry about it. But it was expensive, and probably part of it was he didn't want to spend the money. But also, I think just philosophically, he just didn't really want to spray all these chemicals on the land. And so the other recommendation was to dig them all out. Oh, this is 100 acres, and it took probably 10 or 15 years of just slowly digging them out. Every time I'd come home to visit, my father would put a shovel in my hand, we'd be out digging, and so it really taught me this lesson of long-term thinking to improve the land, and so that just left a lasting impression on me. And then another really formative experience I had was after college. I went into the Peace Corps, and I was living in Guatemala, and it was kind of ironic to have this gringo go down and quote unquote teach people in Guatemala whose ancestors have been farming the same land for 8,000 years, like the definition of sustainability. But they, over the past 80 years, they've gotten away from their traditional practices and gotten on the kind of bought into the green revolution, where they have to use hybrid seeds, which they can't. Hybrid seeds won't breed true, so you have to constantly buy them every year. You can't save those seeds, and then they're very productive, really big yielding seed varieties, but they require massive inputs of fertilizer and pesticides. And so then in order to do that, they have to get on this credit system, which can get them into trouble if the crop doesn't work. In the olden days, they would have, every family had probably 10 different corn varieties, like these heirloom varieties. Some were for early harvest, some were for late harvest, some were just for biomass to feed their cattle if they had them, or some of them were like really thick stalks they could use for fencing material. And because they had like a variety of things that all ripened at different times, there was more diversity. So they were just they didn't have these things didn't get wiped out. They were never there's never a total crop failure. Maybe one would. And so my job was really just kind of just a little bit kind of hand holding to kind of like tell them it's okay to like go back and try some of those old family practices. But seeing this rampant use of pesticides and like kids applying pesticides, people who couldn't read the warnings on the pesticide label, like that just really kind of made me really alarmed. So that was a big inspiration for me to be organic.
So I didn't realize that you were in agriculture basically your entire life. Before you started the winery, was your family in the wine business, or that's something you took on by yourself?
Yeah, that was new. So my best friend and I were living in New York after college, and we just started drinking wine and learning about it, and just had this dream like to move to California and make wine. And we just one day we just decided like now's the time, and we quit our jobs, moved to California, and looked all over for land for sale, and probably looked at about 100 different places before we found this beautiful kind of semi-abandoned vineyard that was just in bad shape. And then we nursed it back to health, and put out a lot of compost and planted cover crops to restore it.
That's pretty awesome. So when you first started it, did y'all get the organic certification when y'all opened, or is that kind of like a process?
It was a process, and there's some costs involved, so it took us a while and we didn't know how important how we didn't know if we needed like that certification, but I just thought from like my way of thinking, like it helps me, keeps me honest, to like it makes me like really commit. If I'm I know someone's going to come and audit us and inspect us every year, it just makes me more committed to doing it.
I visited a pecan farm in Austin like 3 or 4 weeks ago, and they're a regenerative pecan farm, and I didn't even realize that that was a thing. Like, I was like, there's all these other farming industries like pecans and probably apples, and I didn't even think about all this other stuff. I just thought about cows and sheep and stuff like that. And so I've started talking to more and more people like that pecan farmer and like yourself, and I was like, oh man, there's this whole other way to grow and manage our food population and that stuff that we drink. Are more and more wineries starting to become more aware of organic or even regenerative farming?
Yeah, it's definitely like what has been the buzzword here is sustainable, which some people don't like that term because it can be overused or misused. It's kind of like greenwashing, but it's also a little bit more. It's broader than organic. Organic really just focuses on what you're not allowed to do, which specifically what products you can or can't use on your vines. And for me, that's a really important baseline. But sustainable addresses, things beyond that, like um, if you are like your water usage or your energy usage, how uh, sustainable those are, and like your what you're doing with your waste. I think like those are all really important things to think of as well. I just wish they would also, focus on, eliminating synthetic pesticides and fertilizers too.
Yeah. Can you talk about the process the journey of becoming or getting that regenerative organic certification? What did that look like, and what are some of the things that you had to incorporate or stop doing from like the in the field perspective?
Yeah, the first thing we had to do was apply, and just we had to apply to be certified. And then once we got the go ahead, we had to fill out what they call a ROSP. It's a Regenerative Organic System Plan, and um, it took a while, but I understood that process because for organic, we have something called an organic system plan. So it was just a little bit more intensive of something that I had already been doing, which is really just kind of describing all of your practices. And a lot of the things we had not done, like, for example, I mentioned, like, we didn't have a policy on how we're making sure people aren't victims of human trafficking. So we had to write a policy for lots of things like that. Then we had to do some soil analysis that organic does not require. And then we had to do these, so that there's soil analysis that has to go to a lab, but then there are these in-house soil evaluations you have to do. You don't need any special training to do them. But it's really more qualitative or observational analysis. So like we'd go out in the vineyard, dig like a 1 meter by 1 meter hole, and then just count how many different life forms, animal life forms we see in that space.
Okay.
And you don't have to be an entomologist to say, oh, well, this, to know the species. You just know, oh, there's like an earthworm, there's some kind of a beetle, and a little aphid like thing, or something. You just had to kind of give a rough guess of like how many different life forms you see, and that's a good indicator of your soil health. We had to do this soil, what's it called, a slake test, where you take like a little piece of chunk of soil, dip it in water, and then just note like over 5 minutes, if it just completely disintegrates, that means that your soil is not very doesn't have a lot of things in it holding it together. If it just like immediately turns into mud, that's a bad thing. So you just kind of note what happens over time. One of them was to just smell the soil and describe the smell or describe the color. So and you wouldn't be like kicked out of the program if any of those things are going the wrong way, but it's really just trying to get farmers to really observe their land more, and I think that's a great practice. The other thing we had to do is, as I say, like eliminate or move towards eliminating tillage. So, and in doing that, as you do that, you're building up organic matter in the soil, but you're also tying up a lot of nutrients in that organic matter as it's growing. And so your vineyard could suffer in that time. So you need a way to kind of get over the hump. Eventually your organic matter will start kicking off nutrients to feed your vines, but there's this like small period of time, maybe a few years, where you're tying up those nutrients. So adding compost is something we did like in the initial years. And then the other really important thing from my perspective is using animals. So we brought in sheep during like the period right before the vines start growing. So in late February, March, we bring in about 600 sheep, and we move them every 1 or 2 days throughout the vineyard to eat all the weeds that would compete with the vines, but then as they eat them, they're digesting them, and they're dropping their manure, and that's really enriching the soil. And as they walk, they're not tilling the soil, but they're kind of, their hooves kind of work it in a little bit,
Yeah.
and like the vines really respond after that process.
I was going to ask you about animal impact, because the land stewards that I've spoken to like mention animal impact as one of the most important principles or pillars of regenerative farming is getting that animal impact. I was going to ask you how you do that, but you bring in the sheep on a periodic basis, sounds like.
Yeah, we bring them in, yeah, right before bud break. It's kind of we've tried a lot of different ways to approach that. We've had our own flock. We've rented sheep, but what works the best is to work with a local shepherd, because that's what they do. That's what they specialize in. They know what their animals need, and we just tell them our goals, and that works a little better. It's a little more expensive, but and it makes me think like maybe we should have our own flock again. But we're experts in grape growing and not as much in sheep management. So
How do
kind of
you
makes sense to have someone else do it.
how do they get the sheep from to not eat the vines?
They come in the dormant season,
Okay.
so the vines aren't growing, and they won't eat the bark or the wood.
Okay.
We have we have a lot of predators. We're surrounded by woods. So in the past, we've used sheep, and we've lost some to coyotes and mountain lions. And so one time we brought in miniature cattle, because they don't get eaten. But even though they're miniature, they're still probably like 700 or 800 pounds, and they were kind of rough on the infrastructure. Like if he wants to, a cow wants to scratch her back, she'll like rub up and down on a an end post, and it'll knock it over.
Yeah.
And then we had a few of them were bulls, and they would always want to like butt heads, and it was it was pretty just kind of like too much macho energy for
Yeah.
for what we wanted.
Did anyone from the ROC come out and measure your soil? Like whenever you took the soil samples, did they give you those results back and show you how much biodiversity you had in the soil? And I mean, I don't know what all goes into soil analysis, but I know one of them is like, they're looking at how many different species are in the soil. Did you get any of those results back?
No, well, that's a good. I I don't think you're asking this question, but it makes me think a little bit about it. Like they don't come out, like the organization doesn't inspect you. It's more they come out and audit you just to make sure you're doing what you're doing.
Okay.
So they're not taking samples, but they want to know that we've done it. They want to see the lab
Okay.
results. So we take samples and send it to a commercial lab. We don't test for that. Like the one you're talking about is to look at, your ratio maybe of fungi to bacteria or
There you
things
go.
like that. That's not one of the tests that we've done, although I'm really curious to learn about that.
Yeah.
The tests that we do for them are like, some basic ones like, nitrogen, but a really important one that is the soil organic matter, because that's a real important determinant of soil health, because that's telling us, if we're actually drawing CO2 out of the atmosphere and putting it in the ground where it can help.
So what are you looking at from the soil organic matter? What ratings and measures are you looking at?
There's like a suite. There's like you have to pick 6 out of like maybe 12 options. I think we did total nitrogen, soil organic matter, phosphorus, potassium. I can't remember the other ones.
And they got to be over a certain threshold though to achieve that.
They don't know. There's not like a numerical requirement that you have
Okay.
to be somewhere. But if your soil organic matter is going down, like that's a bad thing, and they would probably want you to kind of explain why you think that's happening.
Yeah.
But when they come out they audit every year. It's really a lot of it's like looking at paperwork and making sure that we are um, like they want to see all of our receipts for things we purchased to make sure that, we're not, buying.
No glyphosate or
Yeah.
anything. You gotta.
And then they'll take our vineyard team like aside and interview them one-on-one in private to make sure like what we say we're, you know, doing with them is actually true. Like they look at our payroll records to make sure that we are paying what we say we are. It's pretty
Uh,
involved.
I guess I was expecting it for them to mostly look at like go into the land and look at the soil and be one with nature, I guess. But it sounds like it's more process and paperwork. Is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
No.
It's more like yeah.
Is there any concern from your perspective on one entity owning this certification?
Um,
Like I don't know who
I had
all
not thought of that.
like who owns quote unquote owns organic? Is it the government, the FDA? Like who owns
Oh, so
that?
yeah, so organic was just a term that anybody could use until right around the turn of the century, like around 2000. The USDA
Okay.
like took that over and it defined it.
Okay.
And um, so there are organizations that are certified by the USDA to certify operations as being organic.
Hmm.
Um, in the process of creating that law, some people feel that they kind of dumb down that process a little, the organic certification from what it had been, in order to kind of make a bigger to allow more operations to join, because there are a lot of really big farms that wanted to do certain things like I can't remember what they were, like not GMOs, but I can't remember. There are certain practices that they allowed that some people thought were kind of controversial that shouldn't have been allowed.
Wow.
And so that was, partly why other people wanted to make like a more restrictive um, certification process.
Okay. So
And then the term regenerative organic is that's owned by the Regenerative Organic Alliance that, like I say, was founded by Patagonia, the Rodale Institute, and Dr. Bronner Soap.
yeah. No,
But it's a nonprofit. And
oh, that's cool. Yeah,
yeah.
I've heard a little bit about the Rodale Institute. I think there's certain, I don't know what you'd call them, like outposts or there's certain hubs, I guess, that the Rodale Institute works with certain farmers, and then that farm will become a hub for the Rodale Institute. Is that how it works?
Oh, okay. Maybe, yeah. I know
Oh,
that's true of the savory.
Savory
Ins
Institute. Yeah,
Yeah,
I didn't know if it was the Rodale as well.
but Rodale might also. Rodale, it's there. I think they were the first organic organization, like back in the 30s or 40s, and they have had these. I think they're based in Pennsylvania, and they've got these different farm plots that they've been farming, to compare, conventional versus organic, for like many decades, so they can really understand like the yields, how those change, compare them to conventional to organic, and now regenerative.
It,
So that's kind of interesting.
it sounds like you've been, practicing regenerative principles for a long time, but since you've got the certification and since you've transitioned to this way of farming, have you seen major differences in your land?
Um, I don't know. It's
Is
hard
it
to say.
is it too soon?
One, we kind of transitioned the no-till over a few years, and some of them weren't no-till yet. And it was interesting. We had a really severe drought the past 2 years. We had some decent rain this past winter, but the two prior years were really some of the driest years in, maybe thousands of years. And we didn't see like a difference in yield between the vines that were tilled and not tilled. So that made me feel pretty confident that it's a good
Yeah.
direction.
What about the overall taste of the wine? Is there a difference in taste between conventional and organic slash regenerative?
That's a great question. I don't know, because it's really it's hard to have like a really good like a good experiment to separate that out. The vineyard, just the soil changes from one place to the next, so that's going to create a difference in the flavor. And if you compare over years, like the weather's different every year, so that has a bigger impact. Some people claim that the wines taste more alive, but I don't know if that's true. But one thing I have heard, there's a phrase that people use a lot of in tasting wine called minerality, and it was thought that if you have like a limestone based soil, it gives the wine a more of a mineral flavor. And I think some experiments have been done to show that it really doesn't is not true. But some people think that there are the fungi that live in the soil that associate themselves with the vine's roots. They'll burrow into the root and then grow these hyphae, these like tubes out, and they're able to extend the roots reach by like 500%. Oh, wow. And so they're able to they take carbohydrate. The vine gives them like food that gives them carbohydrates to live on, and then those fungi go out and find minerals in the soil that the vine needs and transport it back. And so some people think that, but if you till the ground, you're going to kill that. You're going to break up that network. So some people think that leaving that soil intact allows those fungi to access the minerals the vine needs, and that could add more minerality to the wine.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I don't know if that's been proven or how you would even go about proving it. But
have you read anything or any books or anything by David Montgomery?
Oh, no. I've heard some podcasts. He's the dirt or
the soil. Yeah.
No, I've heard him on some podcasts, but I want to read some of his books. Yeah.
Man, I'm reading one right now. It's called What Your Food Ate. So that's the second book. His first book that I read was The Hidden Half of Nature, and both him and his wife both wrote it. And he was talking about that trade-off between what you were talking about, like the roots will give it carbohydrates, and then the whatever it is trading off plants. It's kind of like this even trade that they do with each other. It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I would butcher the hell out of it if I try to recollect it. But he was talking about phytochemicals within the vegetables or crops in general. Have y'all measured that, like from your grapes when you first started to what it is now, like the phytochemicals within the grapes?
No.
That would be that'd be pretty cool to look at, to see how many I guess how many nutrients are in each grape compared to like a conventional farm. That'd be pretty cool to look at.
Yeah.
Man, that's a lot to take in. So what like do you bring people in from the community and get them to like show them the process of the regenerative way versus the non-conventional way? Do y'all do any like seminars or teachings?
I give tours at the vineyard just to consumers, but also to people that are other vineyards and wineries that are interested in transitioning. And I've spoken on a few panels, but I really want to spread that message. I want to help people on this journey, because I think it's really important. And I'm just like, our vineyard's 47 acres, so that's just like just a speck of dust on the whole planet. One thing that really inspires me about regenerative is, before, when I think about climate change, I just think about it as either really abstract or there's nothing we can do about it. It's just sort of inevitable. But as I've gone through this journey, I've learned that agriculture in general contributes about 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions, but the soil has this tremendous ability to store like massive amounts of carbon. And so I don't manage very much land, but collectively farmers and ranchers around the world control most of the world's land mass. And even if we could get like a small percentage of people to increase their soil organic matter by just a little bit, like that that could offset, a huge part of global emissions. So I really want to help spread that word. And one thing that's really inspiring is like, I'm just like this, hippie out in California, but to see like Midwestern, like corn farmers adopting these practices, that they control massive, many more acres. And, to see that happen, like Gabe Brown, I don't know if you've heard about him, like, and a lot of, ranchers they're adopting these processes. So it's not just some kind of weird fringe things, like these, legit farmers are doing these practices too. And I think that's going to help convince more farmers to do it.
I was lucky enough to be able to speak with Gabe on a podcast, and I asked him to define what regenerative agriculture means. It seems like every person has a different definition. If you had to define it, how would you define what regenerative agriculture is?
Using the land to heal the land, sort of how I would describe it.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. How did Gabe Brown?
Oh man, I used to have it memorized. Let me see if I can find it. I could try to find it. Hold on. I used to have it memorized because I guess he got asked that question a bunch, so he would. Let me see. Oh, here it is. This is how he defines.
Sure. So the definition I like to use for regenerative agriculture is simply this: farming and ranching in synchrony with nature to repair, rebuild, revitalize, and restore ecosystem function, beginning with all life in the soil, moving to all life above the soil. So it's all encompassing.
That's how he defined it, which is beautiful.
That's great.
Yeah, I was like, man, that's
really,
that was really eloquent.
He's thought about that a lot.
Yeah. So you've watched all the documentaries like Kiss the Ground, and there's another one coming out pretty soon.
Yeah, that had a big impact on me. That was really inspiring.
Yeah, no, same. That's I don't know if it was that. I think I first talked to this guy named Taylor Collins. He owns Rome Ranch out in Fredericksburg, and I think that was when I first heard the term regenerative. I was looking up like where my food comes from, and I was just wanting to look, I was interested in learning about the chemicals and like all the processed food. So I started talking with like doctors about they've left like the mainstream health narrative and started teaching about environmental pollutants and environmental chemicals and things to avoid. And I think that rabbit hole led me to regenerative farming. So once I talked to this guy named Taylor Collins, I don't know if you're on Instagram or not. Do you have Instagram?
Yeah.
Yeah. Look up Rome Ranch. It's out in Fredericksburg, and they have bison out there, and the dude's super awesome. And
ROME?
Yeah. ROAM.
Okay.
Yeah. Rome. And I first spoke to him. We went out to his place and we did a podcast with him. And man, my mind was just mind blowing. I was like, what the hell? Because I grew up in agriculture my entire life. Out here in Texas, my family has land and we do hay and cattle and stuff like that. So when Taylor was talking about no-till practices and not spraying your fields, I was kind of shocked. And I went back and told my family, I was like, hey, you don't have to till the land to manage it every year. And they kind of looked at me like I was crazy. They're like, no, what are you talking about, you hippie? Like, that's not how it works. So ever since then, man, I've just been more and more consumed with learning about this and sharing the information that people like yourself are doing. You're saying you're one person, but doing podcasts and, sharing your story on social media, I think inspires people and at least plants the seed, no pun intended, but it plants the seeds in people's minds about where their food's coming from. So I think the stuff that you're doing and sharing, man, is very important.
Well, thanks for giving me this opportunity to share my story.
How can people follow you on social media, and can you buy your wine, and do y'all ship it? Is that a dumb question?
Yeah, we ship, okay. I think every state, maybe one state we can't ship to, but medlockames.com. So you can buy on our website, or Medlock Ames on Instagram.
Okay, perfect. Well, Ames, I appreciate your time, man. I'll let you know when this comes out. And like I said, I'm a big fan. Love what y'all are doing there. So thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Take care.
I appreciate you. You have a good one. Bye.
Bye.